If you want to see us talk about demons, let us know in the comments. Wow, that's like sleepaway camp.
Welcome to Dread Alert, where we cover horror across all forms of media. There's something to love about every horror film, and this film is no exception. We saw this movie opening weekend in theaters, and now that it's out on video on demand, we were thrilled to give it another watch. Sarah, what are we covering today?
Today we are talking about MaXXXine, set in 1985 and taking place 6 years after X. MaXXXine follows Maxine Minx as she wraps up Ty West's X Trilogy, featuring some fantastic 80s vibes and some gnarly practical effects along the way.
Yeah. Before we jump in, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, it really helps us out, and let us know what you thought of MaXXXine in the comments below. So this movie has some vibes.
Yeah.
It has some really strong 80s vibes, from the lighting to the set design to the costuming. The palette of the movie itself feels right out of the 80s, the color grading. It's really, really well done.
It absolutely is, and I love that Ty West decided to set this movie in 1985 because I think that it firmly plants us in 1985. We are not having the 70s creep in. We're not going into the 90s. It really sets us into the 80s.
Yeah, we're really anchored into a time period.
Absolutely.
I love that Ty West edited this as well. He was also the editor. I love that he incorporated the split screens, the wipes, the zooms, all of the 80s editing techniques that are so prevalent in those movies we cut our teeth on. I used to watch the edited for TV versions of Friday the 13th during the marathons when I was a kid. Now, don't get me wrong, I cut my teeth on Scream, but I went back and revisited all of those not edited for TV a little later on, and they just have such a special place in my heart. This was a film that brought back a lot of nostalgia for me.
It did really feel nostalgic. The one thing that I really loved is the color of the blood.
Yeah.
It felt very 80s. In the 80s, we had the bright colored blood that didn't necessarily look realistic, but we all knew that it was blood anyway. Yeah. And it had that same sort of vibe, and I just love that kind of thing. It makes me feel so cozy.
Yeah. As cozy as blood can make you feel,
Look,
I suppose.
I honestly, this might be like a nice cozy horror movie.
Hey, we all have them.
But yeah.
You know, the other thing about it is the fact that they used practical effects for a lot of this stuff. So, it would be easy to maybe take a digital way out. But I think in keeping with that time period and anchoring us into the fact that we are in 1985, and then in a meta way that we're watching a film that feels like it was from 1985, right. Having a lot of the practical effects really, it went the extra mile for me, and I think that also contributes to the nostalgia factor.
But I also feel like that is Ty West's sort of love letter. He is a big fan of horror, and that is written all over this movie. And that's another thing that I think is so wonderful about this film, is that it feels like it is a film for us, and also for Ty West. He is making a film that he really loves, and it stands out in the locations that we're sort of seeing. He loves that Hollywood sort of vibe. Honestly,
when we were acting and directing, I used to tell our performers all the time, if you're having fun, the audience is having fun. If you, the thing that makes it interesting is watching someone do their work and do it well and enjoy doing the work. And I get the sense, and I wasn't on set, I don't know how the set was, but I get the sense that the vibe on set was that of craftsmanship and having a good time, exploration. I think that Ty West is writing a love letter to horror films, to the genre as a whole, and to Hollywood, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think the exploration factor, Pearl wasn't supposed to be a movie. That wasn't something that they had set out to do. That was born out of Mia Goth's backstory that she had wrote for Pearl when she was playing Pearl, and Ty West sort of ran with it.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of thing makes for a very good set and a very good exploration and working process. As an actor, but also as a crew member on a film like this.
Absolutely. And I also think this is a love letter to Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of films that are about Hollywood, and some of the best films ever made are about Hollywood. I think this film is a different love letter to Hollywood. It asks some pretty scathing questions about Hollywood and the desire to be famous, but setting, some of the later scenes in the movie at the Hollywood sign, putting some of the most important scenes early on the studio lot. Heck, there's a scene, and spoiler warning, but there's a scene at the Bates Motel. And also a love letter to the 80s. There are scenes that take place inside of a video store that just feels so authentic.
Yeah, I love a good video store cameo, really. And I feel like in some ways this video store is another character in and of itself. We get our video store clerk. We get the green sticker on the horror movie.
The cover of The Puritan alone, the artwork looks like it's right out of the 80s.
It really does. And you know what it reminds me of and is akin to the end of Sleepaway Camp?
It does have a nod to the end of Sleepaway Camp there.
It does. And I don't think that I actually realized it until just now when I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, wow, that's like Sleepaway Camp. Yeah. But that is the beauty of Ty West in knowing this genre inside and out. I feel like he's throwing a lot of different references in there, and I am really excited to kind of revisit not only this movie but also X and Pearl to kind of see what other things I may have missed.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the whole trilogy back to back. Now, we have a very young child, and so it's going to be difficult to watch all 3 movies in a row. We're going to find a way to do it.
We'll find a way.
The other thing I think it was really 80s influenced was the sort of elite parties and the amount of cocaine usage in this movie alone was absolutely of the period.
Yes. Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of it, too. I was not really surprised.
Outside of the 80s influences, there's another set of influences that are very strong with this movie. And I know it's been talked about to death, but this, in its style and in its structure, is actually a Giallo film. The Italian influences here go from top to bottom. We have a masked killer, well, maybe not masked, but his identity is clearly hidden by black gloves and a black hat. And that serves the whodunit aspect. And some of the campy performances are taken right out of the operatic style of some of the Giallo films. We have a female protagonist who's completely out of her element, who is navigating a world with the help of some police and some other supporting characters. This is all just trope after trope after trope of the Giallo genre. And I think it's just another way that Ty West is writing a love letter to horror.
You know, I think that you can speak more to the Giallo aspect and nature of it because that's more of your cup of tea.
I may or may not have dragged Sarah to see Goblin play last year, the score to Demons, and it was a wild ride. Maybe we'll cover Demons on this channel at some point in the future.
Yeah, if you want to see us talk about Demons, let us know in the comments. There's a lot that I think it takes from that. Definitely the campy performances. Yeah. And I really love that as well.
I think the performances are something that sets this movie apart and makes it a very unique experience, from some of the major players in the cast to some of the cameos as well. First and foremost, though, Kevin Bacon.
So good.
Wild. I didn't know he was going to be in this film. I didn't recognize him at first, although that's not my strong suit. But at the end of the day, I was like, every time he was like, oh, I'm done, I'm leaving this, you'll never see me again. I was like, no, please, we want to see you again. You're fantastic in this. He totally transformed himself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we both went into this very cold. We obviously had seen X and Pearl. That was enough to get us to go to the theater. I didn't need to see trailers. I saw a couple of still images, I think, maybe of the movie. Yeah. But I hadn't seen a trailer, I don't think. And so I didn't know Kevin Bacon was in this movie until he showed up, and then he looked the way that he did and sounded the way that he did, that accent. Yeah. Also, Giancarlo Esposito. What a great performance. Somebody else that you may not even recognize. He kind of disappears into this role, but
the styling was absolutely 80s.
It was. It was.
100%.
The hairpiece was something else.
And for a functional character like that to have such a warm performance, you're rooting for him, but he really exists to forward that sort of support character for MaXXXine, that anchor point for MaXXXine in this Giallo world. But you're still rooting for him the whole time.
Oh, you absolutely are. And I think that he always gives a really great performance. So
absolutely.
That doesn't really surprise me about his style of acting and the way that he performs, but he was still so fantastic and such a good support point for MaXXXine in the film. And he has the plot device that they use for his character specifically is a pretty cool one without getting into spoilers.
It was really clever. There was another support for MaXXXine that was in this film that you really loved. And I can't say I didn't. I also really loved this performance as well. But I'll let you talk about it because it was you were leaving the theater talking about this performer.
I was. I actually had to Google it because I did not know who he was. Moses Sumney. He's apparently a musician. And Ty West did that in X as well. He's not afraid of casting non-actors in the roles.
And he's skilled enough to get a good performance out of them as a director. It was an excellent performance.
But yeah, Moses Sumney, a completely likable character as Leon. And one that I was 100% rooting for. Again, a plot device for MaXXXine. He works in the video store. He is a friend of hers. But his performance was actually so good. I would never have known that he was a non-actor. Yeah. I thought that he was just some unknown actor that we had never heard of or seen before. And I think he has one other credit. Literally one other acting credit.
You would never know it.
And you would never know. He's so good in this movie. And then there is the cameo.
Oh, we have Larry Fessenden in this film. And every time you either get to hear him speak or see him on screen, he is going to bring a smile to your face. That man is pure passion for the genre and is out there making things happen, making films happen. Just the horror genre is better with Larry in it. And I will say this movie is better having Larry in it as well.
I was so excited to see Larry pop up in the movie. I was like, oh, is that Larry? Is that Larry? I wasn't screaming because when we were in the theater, I'm very respectful.
Definitely grabbed me.
Yeah, because it was Larry. And I was very excited. But when we rewatched it, I was like, here comes Larry. I was so excited. And he is friends with Ty West. And so to have him in this film is just so lovely. And I thought he was only going to pop up once, and he does pop up more than once.
You get a couple doses of Larry.
That's really a great, nice surprise.
Yeah, it was awesome. Mia Goth. What a performance.
So solid.
Yeah, and across the whole trilogy. I mean, you could say the same for Pearl. You could say the same for X. And I know a common criticism with this film is that the film sort of happens to MaXXXine, and that MaXXXine doesn't take the lead until far too late in the movie. I disagree with this point. I think that if you are spending some time with this performance, you can see the conflict. You can see the vacillation, the choice between one option or another. And that's what's interesting to watch. As actors, that's what you strive to find in the character, because that's what the audience wants to see. If you know where you're going straight through the movie and you're taking charge, there's no conflict, there's no arc to the character. And there's nothing to watch because it's not interesting. Mia Goth does a wonderful job of finding the conflict and finding the decision points in this movie. And you go on a journey with MaXXXine in this film. And it's subtle. It's a subtle performance.
It truly is a subtle performance. But I think that what a lot of people fail to recognize is that MaXXXine is our final girl. And we are supposed to relate to MaXXXine. There's a lot of shenanigans happening around her in this movie. There is some campy performances happening around her in this movie. And yet Mia Goth is grounded in such a reality, and you feel for her and you feel the struggle that she's going through. It's really a masterful performance from Mia Goth.
She's the anchor point that keeps some of these other performances around her believable. It keeps the film believable because of her grounded performance.
Well, and I think that we've seen her go a little bit over the top in Pearl. We know that Mia Goth can go over the top if she wants to go over the top. Maybe because the last time that we saw Mia Goth in these types of movies was in Pearl, people were expecting this over the top performance. But if you go back and you watch X, MaXXXine has always been the one grounded in reality.
100%.
Even in X, she was the one that was grounded into this reality. So why would that change now? But I think that it's because people saw Pearl, and Pearl is a very different character from MaXXXine.
Absolutely, absolutely. And MaXXXine in this film stays true to her core motivation, which is she wants to be famous. She's willing to do whatever it takes. And she's playing her cards close to her chest throughout most of this film so that she doesn't ruin the opportunities that she's been presented.
And I think corollary to that, Pearl really wants to be famous, and we see how she ends up when she chases fame the way that she does versus the way that MaXXXine chases fame.
Pearl doesn't play anything close to the chest, I don't think.
No, not really.
Yeah. All right, I think it's time to talk about what we loved about this movie.
Yes. So the thing that I loved most about this movie was definitely the performances. I think that everyone had a very strong performance in this movie, but I think that Mia Goth sort of stands out above the rest with her very grounded performance as MaXXXine.
Absolutely. And we all know that we're going to get you with a campy performance, and this third act is full of them.
It is very campy, and I think that a lot of people had issue with the third act being as campy as it was, but it was delicious, and I loved every single second of it.
Absolutely.
What about you?
I think the structure and the style, the tone as well. But I think all three of those things work together. The structure and style having a sort of Giallo film feel, and the 80s vibes and the tone really blend nicely to hit me in all of my nostalgia points in some of my favorite horror genres and make it a solid film rec for me. I love it, and I think it'd be worth your time to see.
Oh yeah, the vibes are so good in this film, and I think they really hit the nail on the head there. So what makes this film unique?
For me, I think this film is, first of all, a trilogy. We don't get a lot of trilogies, and who knows if this is going to stay a trilogy, but for the time being, we'll get back to you. For the time being, a full horror trilogy is a unique animal. And I think this trilogy acts as a love letter to horror. We have themes of fame. We have themes of willingness to do whatever it takes. But at the end of the day, this trilogy as a whole uses the adult entertainment industry as a metaphor for the horror genre, saying, maybe that art isn't worth it, or maybe that art is a lower form of art, and applying the same sort of implication to horror. And I think what Ty West is up to here is elevating horror through the use of that analogy over the course of this trilogy, and that really makes it unique. Also, the locations, the tone, and the structure, these are all things that make this movie stand out for me.
And I think that it all boils down to Ty West.
Absolutely.
Being the vision behind everything that has
writing,
happened in this.
The directing, the editing.
I know. It is so pitch perfect for him, and I think that we will be talking about these movies for many, many years to come.
I mean, even the ending of the film gives you a lot to chew on, a lot to think about, and not something that I walked away from with a solid answer on. I think there's some symbolism in the ending of this film that I'm still working out.
I think that is the mark of a good film, is that he does answer some questions for us, but we are left with something to chew on. And I love, personally, whenever I'm able to chew on something after I've seen the film.
Yeah. This film will sit with you.
All right. It is time for our final verdict. Vince?
I'm going to have to give it an 8 out of 10. I think this film is a future slashic, and absolutely, like I said, worth your time to see.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's an 8 or maybe an 8.5 out of 10 for me. Definitely a future slashic. And I think it might be better than Pearl. I don't know.
It's a tough call. Pearl had vibes as well.
It did.
X had vibes as well. And, up until a few weeks ago, I would say Pearl was probably the best in this trilogy. We'd like to watch them again, all three together, and we'll get back to you on whether or not it stays as our possible favorite from the X trilogy, but it's close.
It is very close.
All right, that wraps up our review of MaXXXine. If you haven't checked out our all-time top 5 slashers video, be sure to do that. I know our lists are sure to ruffle a few feathers out there. Be sure to leave your list in the comments below that video. And until next time...
Stay spooky, my friends!